I tell you, Dickie, this nation cannot exist half slave and half free. We all know Lincoln as the President of the United States who preserved the Union during the American Civil War and the President that abolished slavery. But what makes Lincoln a great person as an individual? Is he merely a great and respected president due to his accomplishments, or was there something more to this man? I believe that there is much to learn from the character and the mentality that Lincoln possessed during his lifetime. He especially stands out amongst other political leaders in that his character does not particularly resemble that of someone with great leadership or someone with an excessively grand or ambitious personality that we typically associate leaders with. But instead, his leadership style is that of the opposite. He was rather reserved and quiet outwardly, but somehow he was able to obtain great influence and leadership over the people around him. So in this video, we will explore Lincoln's three distinct characters and see how these characters helped him before and during his presidency. For this video, I'm taking inspirations and references from two books about Lincoln. The first book is Team of Rivals, The Political Genius of Abraham Lincoln, written by Doris Kearns Goodwin. And the second book is Lincoln the Unknown, written by Dale Carnegie. Link in the description below. Alright, let's jump right in. So, the first character of Lincoln we will look at is his empathy towards others. The Kansas-Nebraska Act was passed on May 30th, 1854. This act allowed settlers in the Kansas and Nebraska territories to decide for themselves, essentially, whether to allow slavery, and it repealed the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which had prohibited slavery north of the 36 degrees and 30 minutes line. Lincoln at the time was a former congressman and a private lawyer, and he was not yet in national office. But the Kansas-Nebraska Act pulled him back into politics. He, of course, strongly opposed the act, and he saw the act as a moral and political betrayal of the nation's founding ideals. Motivated by moral conviction, Lincoln re-enters politics and joins the newly formed Republican Party, which opposed the expansion of slavery. The Kansas-Nebraska Act was the catalyst for Lincoln's rise to national prominence. This is where Lincoln famously says, "I tell you, Dickie, this nation cannot exist half slave and half free." Of course, the act of opposing slavery itself portrays the empathy Lincoln had towards others, but even more so, I was impressed on how he approached this issue of slavery with the opposing side. Unlike the majority of anti-slavery orators who promptly went about, denouncing the South and castigating slave owners as corrupt and evil, Lincoln instead denied fundamental differences between the North and the South. He says, quote, "They are just what we would be in their situation. If slavery did not now exist amongst them, they would not introduce it. If it did now exist amongst us, we should not instantly give it up." Yeah, so there was no hatred in Lincoln's heart for the people of the South. He simply acknowledged that they are just what we would be in their position. He did not judge and condemn them personally, but rather he tried to win their hearts over and place himself in the shoes of the slave owner to reason with them and to appeal to their basic humanity and conscience. I think there's much to learn from his, empathetic approach, not only to his own team, but also to everyone else, including those that held opposing views and moral standards. More and more, we see greater divisions between different groups, between different sexes, age, between opposing political parties, of course. Everyone is fighting and everyone hates each other. Everyone loves to argue and one up the opposing team. But no one is really trying to hear the opposing side and try to understand and be empathetic towards others. I think having empathy is such an undervalued character in the modern era, but it's essential for great leadership. It may seem like empathy wouldn't make much of a difference, especially in the short term, but you will quickly realize how without empathy, we always turn to hatred, division, and ultimately destruction and chaos. Alright, so the second character we will look at is Lincoln's purpose-driven humility. What do I mean by purpose-driven humility? And so during the 1855 Senate race, Lincoln had strong support among the Republican Party. He had to reach a majority of 51 votes to be elected, and Lincoln reached a high point of 47, only 4 shy of victory. The only reason he couldn't get those 4 votes was because a candidate called Lyman Trumbull was also running for the same anti-slavery cause as Lincoln, and he held 5 votes for himself. After several ballots, it became clear Lincoln couldn't win the 51 majority vote, which meant the opposing pro-slavery Democrat would win the Senate. Imagine having 47 votes to yourself, and here beside you is someone claiming to be on the same team with the same cause, but with only 5 votes. Under normal circumstances, it would only make sense, of course, for the person with 5 votes to give up their vote for Lincoln, since Lincoln holds majority of the votes already. But here, Lincoln makes a truly bold and surprising decision. He understood that no matter what, this guy Lyman Trumbull has no intentions of giving up his votes for Lincoln whatsoever. And unless Lincoln or Trumbull wins, like I said, the pro-slavery candidate is surely going on to victory. And so rather than risk splitting the anti-slavery vote and letting a pro-slavery Democrat win, Lincoln withdraws and throws his support behind Trumbull. His floor manager, Stephen Logan, rightly protests, saying, why should the candidate with the much larger vote given to the candidate with the much smaller vote? And to this, Lincoln replies, quote, you will lose both Trumbull and myself. And I think the cause in this case is to be preferred to men. Because of Lincoln's sacrifice, Trumbull then goes on to win the Senate seat in 1855. I think this story truly showcases Lincoln's humility and his long-term vision, always putting the greater good and the higher purpose above his personal ambitions or vendetta. This character of Lincoln is repeated again and again throughout his lifetime. Even after he becomes president, he chooses 3 men who had been his chief rivals for the Republican nomination, Seward, Chase, and Bates, as his cabinet members. When asked about this, Lincoln answers, quote, we needed the strongest men of the party in the cabinet. We needed to hold our own people together. I had looked the party over and concluded that these were the very strongest men. Then I had no right to deprive the country of their services. I think Lincoln's humility and his purpose-driven mind helped him make best decisions for the long run, and it helped him gain allies instead of rivals. Humility is, I think, also such an undervalued character in the modern society. It's rare to see someone with a purpose-driven humility that puts the greater good above the higher purpose, above one's personal affairs and ambitions. But that's what truly separates the mediocre leaders from the great. All right, the last character of Lincoln that we will discuss is his slow but unwavering decisiveness. It's 1862, the Civil War is still raging on, and Lincoln issues one of the most important documents in American history, the Emancipation Proclamation. This proclamation marked a turning point in both the Civil War and the moral direction of the United States. It was an executive order issued by President Abraham Lincoln that declared all enslaved people in Confederate-held territory to be free. As powerful and impactful this proclamation was going to be for the country, many worried that Lincoln would fold under pressure because of the powerful opposition it would inevitably encounter and perhaps reconsider and, retract his proclamation. But Lincoln's friend, critic, and advisor, Frederick Douglass, said, quote, Abraham Lincoln will take no step backward. Lincoln may be slow, but Abraham Lincoln is not the man to reconsider, retract, and contradict words and purposes solemnly proclaimed over his official signature. If he has taught us to confide in nothing else, he has taught us to confide in his word. Yeah, and just like Douglas predicted, once the president staked himself to a forward position, he did not give up ground. Lincoln himself had said, I never in my life felt more certain that I was doing right than I do in signing this paper. If my name ever goes into history, it will be for this act, and my whole soul is in it. we can get a glimpse of Lincoln's slow but unwavering decisiveness throughout this whole process. He perhaps could have proclaimed this act a long time ago, like as soon as he became a president and, declared everyone free from the get-go. But making such hasty decisions more often than not is bound for failure and regret, and such decisions fold easily under pressure. But Lincoln never acted hastily and made decisions willy-nilly. Lincoln's law partner William Herndon says about Lincoln that he knew his subjects inside and outside, upside and downside, before expressing opinion on anything. Lincoln was naturally cautious and thoughtful, not the type to jump into new ideas easily. But once he made up his mind and once he committed himself, he stuck with it. You could feel the conviction and he demonstrated singular tenacity. I think this is great character to develop in our lives as well. We make decisions hastily and we end up backtracking and giving up easily or, forgetting about it altogether. But those that achieve great things, they put in great amount of time and effort into making a decision, but once it's made, they stick to it no matter what. Alright, so that's it for today. Like and subscribe if you learned anything from this video, and see you next time.